At the time of this recording, we have 4 products available, 2 for the Tesla 21-inch Uberturbine wheels and 2 for the Tesla 20-inch Induction wheels. We have one that comes in gloss hot rod red and another which is gloss white. In the future, we'll have additional colors and we'll support additional types of wheels for different cars. For demonstration purposes, we're going to go ahead and install the Tesla 21-inch Uberturbine accents and emblems. Let's look at what comes inside one of these packages. So inside, there are 4 separate sheets, one for each wheel. Make sure you hang on to the package header here, which on the back has the QR code for the instructional video that you're looking at now, as well as additional instructional videos that may be provided in the future. We also list a required tool, which is a heat gun, which is necessary to activate the adhesive on the vinyl. And then there's some highly recommended tools which make the whole installation process much easier. And then it tells you what's actually included in the package. So for each of these sheets, 1 sheet per wheel, we provide, in the case of the 21-inch Uberturbine, there's 11 spokes on the wheel. So there's 1 for each of the spokes, as well as 1 extra for just in case, something gets wrinkled or the adhesive sticks to itself and it's hard to pull apart. There's also 1 emblem for the center cap of the wheel and an additional extra one, again, just in case something goes wrong. So inside of this package header piece, there's some cleaning pads here. These are isopropyl alcohol, and these are the same as what you use, for cleaning a cut. They're also used in industry for removing grime and grease to allow things like adhesive emblems and accents to stick better. So first step is to thoroughly clean your wheel. Get all the road grime, oil, and wax, whatever you've used to shine the wheels up. Get this thoroughly clean and then let it completely dry. And that'll allow the adhesive from the vinyl to stick more completely and last longer. We're going to go ahead and install the accents and emblems onto the front passenger tire of a Tesla Model Y Performance. So, as mentioned, to make things easier, we're going to use a floor jack. You can use any jack that will work with a Tesla. A particular spot I'm in here works for Model 3 and all versions of Model Y. There's a specific spot underneath the car where a type of pad like this has a little centerpiece to help locate there's a hole in the bottom. And this can go up into the hole and it'll stay in that place. The problem is, especially with the performance model of the Model Y, there's not enough room because of this. If it's in there, the edges of the jack prevent it from sliding in and out. So instead of doing that, I use a hockey puck. So because that doesn't have the centerpiece, these are the edges I'm talking about. You can put that in here and then you can slide this in and out, even though the car is pretty low. If this were in here and this were up into the frame of the car, then this piece would remain snug to the car and this would be hitting into the jack itself. There are some jacks that are lower than this. I've had this one a while now. If I were to buy a new one, I'd get one that's lower to the ground for cars that have been lowered like this one. So you can feel in here where the hole is, and you just try to align with where that hole is located. I mean, it takes some jiggling around to get it. I also want to note that the front tires, once they're off the ground, they can spin freely. The rear tires have the parking brake that'll lock them in place. And then you have to go in to the screen, and there's a function that allows the back wheels to be disengaged from the parking brake. And that will allow you to rotate the rear tire freely. A best practice from a safety perspective is to use a jack stand to hold the weight of the car and not rely on a hydraulic or other type of jack, scissor jack, whichever, to actually bear the weight of the car while you're working on it. Although it rarely happens, it is certainly possible for the hydraulics to maybe not be engaged tightly here. Maybe it can come down slowly or fast if it's really not positioned and tightened correctly. And jacks slip and can fail from time to time. So a jack stand is highly recommended. To get the jack stand under there, we're going to have to go a little bit higher. And again, this isn't an absolute requirement, but it is important for safety. All right, so this feels pretty good where it is. I can tell by feeling underneath there that the jack stand is positioned under a good solid part of the car. So I'm gonna let this down just a hair to put the weight on the jack stand and not have it totally relying on the jack. And then I tighten it back up, give it just a little bit of a push so that there's a little bit of the weight on the jack stand and a little bit of the weight on the hydraulic jack itself. So the chances of them both failing are pretty slim. Now that we have the car jacked up and the front wheel able to spin freely, we'll go ahead and do some preparation to allow the adhesive to stick better to the paint on the wheel. And then we'll go ahead and apply the accents. The one tool that is actually required is a heat gun. Now this is something that gets hotter than your typical hair dryer. This particular one is available at places like Home Depot, most hardware stores. You can order similar heat guns, online, Amazon, and others. This particular one has two settings. There's a low and a high. I always use the low setting, which is hotter than a hair dryer. This is normally too hot, the high setting, for the type of vinyl that we're using. This is used more for wrapping a car and other purposes, or for removing paint. First, we're going to go ahead and remove one of the alcohol prep pads. And we're going to save the other three for the other three wheels. Now, this whole process of installing the accents and emblems, can take an hour or so per wheel, so it may not be practical to do it all in one day depending on your schedule. So we're going to go ahead and just clean this one wheel rather than doing multiple wheels. Again, in case we have to do it on another day, we may have to clean the wheel again, so we'll just do one at a time. And there are two surfaces to each of these spokes for the turbine here, this turbine look. This one here is the one that's going to match the accent. The other one, it has a similar design, but we don't want to overdo it and do both sides. We want just a little bit of accent, just a little bit of red or white or whichever color you choose. We don't want to overdo it. It's also a more natural curve on this particular piece rather than on the opposite side where there's a flat edge and it doesn't have the same appeal, the same natural curve to it. So again, we're just going to do one side of each spoke. And in this case, on the front passenger side, I am approaching it from the front of the car. On the other side of the car, I probably want to be hitting it from the other direction. This is where it's nice to be able to spin this rather than having it on the ground and having to move the car every time you want to do a different spoke. So I can easily go from spoke to spoke, and I want to get a little bit of this back edge in case there's likely some road debris there. Hopefully you've done a good job of pre-cleaning this wheel with soap and water and then wiping it down thoroughly and making sure this is dry before we do this. But again, I'm getting this back edge just a little bit in case there's a little extra grime. And then you just want to, this is mainly to get rid of any grease, car wax, anything that might interfere with the adhesive sticking to the paint of the wheel. I'm not doing the entire wheel, and this is just isopropyl alcohol, which shouldn't affect the paint itself in terms of discoloration. So when I started this process, I had the cap here to the bottom, so I'll know when I've been once around the block when this cap is again facing the bottom. So every time I install one of these things, as a habit, for consistency, I start with this filler cap towards the bottom. I'm just trying to do enough of the edge to where you can see there's a natural curve here. That's what I've tried to align to. You know, the accents will overlap this just a little bit so that you can see a little bit of the color here on the curve. And this is the last one. On the 21-inch Uberturbine wheels, there are 11 of these spokes. On the 20-inch Induction wheels, there are 10. So you get one less of the accent per sheet. So now we're ready to go ahead and start applying the accents. Once we're done with the accents, we'll apply the Tesla emblem to this center wheel cap. Again, we'll take our sheet and we'll peel off one of the accents. And this is the adhesive back, and if you were to look at this very closely with a magnifying glass or microscope, you would see there are lines, microscopic type lines going both directions. And this is part of what 3M calls their control tack adhesive, and it's designed to allow air bubbles to be squeezed out. So if we have a wrinkle, because we are going to be trying to match some contours here, so if this ends up being stretched a little bit or a bubble gets caught along the way, we can force this out. Now this adhesive can be repositioned. Until you heat it, it's not going to stick real firmly. So you can lightly stick it down and get it exactly where you want it to be. If you don't like it there, it has a light tackiness to it, so I wouldn't push down too hard. But again, you can just pop it right back up again. Once you get it positioned exactly where you want it, then you can hit it with the heat gun, and the heat gun will actually, at the right temperature on a low setting on a heat gun versus high on a hair dryer, which I don't recommend. Use the low setting on the heat gun and it will actually melt this slightly, and that'll give it a nice firm adhesion. At that point, you can wait a couple of days and it's going to be really firmly stuck to the paint. They consider it a permanent adhesive, although it will come off if you try to. You can peel it, but it's going to take a little bit of effort. I've had these on this car for 2.5 years and have had no problems with this peeling, going through car washes with pressure washers and getting hit by direct sunlight. So there's a trick or two to getting this positioned right. I've found over time it's best to start in the center rather than at one of the ends. So I usually try to get in here and I keep my hands bare rather than using nitrile gloves. I want to be able to feel the back edge and see if it's against the very back of the wheel. And then I'm also trying to get this corner piece, keep the same line. And again, because it's just lightly tacked, I try to get this back corner right to here. And if I've done it properly, again, you can lift it and keep adjusting it till you get it just right. I can feel that it's right on the edge. Just follow the line all the way down. Again, this is where it's nice to have this thing jacked up so that you can rotate the wheel as much as you need to get this positioned right. So now I've got this back corner about where I want it, and I want this little front corner right about there. So then I'm going to just lightly push this down one more time. Make sure I'm following the right edge. That's about where I want it. So now that I've got the back edge down without wrinkles, I'm going to lightly just pull down just a little bit, and then I'm going to hit this with a heat gun here. I don't want to push it and force wrinkles. So again, I'm going to do the first setting on this heat gun. It doesn't take much. Now this is like a giant heat sink. This is an aluminum wheel, so it's absorbing the heat really quickly. You don't want to hit the heat gun to your hand, and this gets very hot. This metal nose piece gets really hot, so avoid touching that, avoid putting it down on a surface that can melt or burn. But hit up here first, and then pull it back, and just pull it down a little bit. This will get rid of the wrinkles. Just give it a pull if you need to. Go all the way up to the front. Just be careful not to be burning your fingers. You usually try to give it at least a minute per accent to ensure that the adhesive is stuck down properly and completely. Make sure I have wrinkles along the way. Then you can kind of pull these side to side if you feel a wrinkle, if there's a bubble. The more you do these, the more consistent it becomes. So this one's looking pretty good. So then I'm just going to rotate, and I'll go through these one by one. We'll do a second one here. Again, I'm going to start with the middle. Just feel that the edge of the sticker, the accent is right against the back edge here. It's easier to do it in the middle first because you can kind of teeter-totter this thing to get the front and the back where you want it to be. Again, if you're too far forward or backward, side to side, you can lift it up and reposition it. Okay, so the middle here feels about right. And I like where this edge is. And this little point looks about right. A little bit of a wrinkle there, so I'm going to reposition one more time. And following the edge, the back edge down. And now it's exactly where I want it to be. So just lightly push the back down, and like before, I'll just pull down across this curved edge. I don't want to go all the way to the bottom. I don't want to force any wrinkles. I'll let the heat gun shrink this a little bit. Again, we're on the low setting. You can see how it responds to the heat pretty quickly. Check against these edges here, make sure there's no bubbles. Pulling down again. Feel a little wrinkle. I'll pull side to side. And there we go, 11 spokes, all covered with vinyl. No wrinkles, looks good. So the final step is the center cap. If we want to go ahead and put an emblem on there, the Tesla logo. To do that, we use this center wheel cap removal tool. This is something you can get at a place like Harbor Freight or Home Depot as well. Different brands, some are more expensive than others. I think this is like $5 for a set of 4 with different curves and hooks on the end. But this one with about a 90-degree angle is perfect. You just pop it in a little hole here, and then to give it a yank, it comes right out. It's just held on by clips. So by taking this out, I mean, you could certainly do it here, but it's a little more awkward. It's easier to put it on a flat surface. I've moved the wheel center cap over to a bench where it's easier to apply the emblem, better lighting. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by peeling off the emblem from the backing sheet here. And again, this is control tack, so it's not a permanent bond yet. We're going to place this I usually start with the tip here, just lightly touch it, and then try to align the rest of it so it's centered. And if it's not the way you want it, you can pull it up and try it again. Looks pretty good. Get the other piece. Press it down with our fingernail and our finger a little bit, and then to finish it, like with the accents, we'll hit it with the heat gun. And again, this is plastic, unlike the rest of the wheel, which is metal, so you want to be careful not to heat this up too much. You don't want to ruin the paint or start melting the plastic itself. So again, I'm on the low setting on the heat gun. And just give it about 30 seconds, no more than that, and then press it down all the way to the edges, and that then activates the adhesive, melts it so that it's a more permanent bond. And now finally, with the emblem mounted to the center cap, we'll go ahead and pop that in. Usually point this down towards the valve, and there we go. And we'll just let it down off the jack and remove the jack stand. We're good to go.